Hello, everybody, and welcome to the National Inventor Club. My name is Brian Freed. I'm the founder and host tonight. We have guest shark, Matt Higgins. He is also the author of this amazing book. I have all my notes already here. Burn the Boats is a book that just came out. So just real quick, National Inventor Club, we have free and paid membership. Obviously, membership has its benefits. There's activities. There's a bunch of us going to the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office in April. That's going to be very exciting. There's other benefits and discounts, so please take a look at the website when you have a chance. All right, here we go. We have Matt Higgins. I got your book, Matt. I've been reading it and studying it. Good stuff. So Matt has a very impressive resume. You've seen him on Shark Tank. He's a guest shark from Shark Tank season 11 and 12. And he is the co-founder of RSE Ventures. About $1 billion, Matt? $1 billion.
That was before the bank crisis. So I don't know.
On a good day.
Yeah.
On a good day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's the author of Burn the Boats. And we're going to go through the book. We're going to go through lessons learned. And we're going to hear quite a bit about his perspective on invention, inventors, entrepreneurs, and startups. But let's start off, Matt. I can give the whole bio on you. I think you do a better job. So why don't you tell us more about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and you have a very impressive background from when you first started. And I know where it's from, at McDonald's, because I started there too. But why don't you tell us more about yourself, Matt?
Yeah. First of all, it's great to be with everybody and to a whole room of inventors and entrepreneurs and dreamers and risk takers. I wish I could see all your faces, but thank you for coming to hear me. I'll get into it a little bit later, but like many families in the world, right, there was a Higgins fortune at the turn of the century, and it was completely squandered. So by the time they got to me, that Higgins fortune had dwindled down to basically government cheese and subsistence in a tiny little apartment in Queens. But let me take you back. I grew up in Queens, New York. Shout out to anybody from New York. Shout out to anybody specifically from Queens. And I was the product of a single mother and four boys, four rotten boys living in a tiny little rent-stabilized garden apartment on Springfield Boulevard in Queens. And my mother had no education, but she had a fierce mind and was very determined to make something out of her life. So my earliest memories were watching my mom lead my dad, really cleaning, floors on her hands and knees for elderly citizens as part of a job she had for Catholic Charities, and then trying to reclaim some dignity by getting her GED. I watched her go to get a GED, enter into Queens College, and she would bring me to classes all the time. So, there was this duality to my life, watching my mother aspire, and she had a lot of health issues. And at the same time, we were barely surviving. So back then, it wasn't, cool to be poor. And now the kids get shamed for having money. So the whole world is reversed. But back then, you would do everything you could to cover it up. And so I was always hustling. I would sell leather handbags on top of the van at a flea market when I was 11 years old, $5 handbags. And I would be the kid who would knock on your window on Easter and try to sell you flowers. And I was working at McDonald's. My job at the party room was to scrape the gum underneath tables. And I was the best damn gum scraper at that McDonald's. So work was the backdrop of my life and poverty. My mother had a lot of health issues, and they compounded over time. And when you're a little kid and you're growing up in those circumstances, you're always looking for a hero, a man to come in, the government to come in. We would take a bus an hour and a half away or hour away to go to church pantries to get boxes of food to hide what we're dealing with. And at some point, things just felt a lot more dire. And I felt like if I didn't make radical change, my mother would probably eventually succumb from her health issues. I hated being poor. I hated having no power. And so I had an epiphany. Like a lot of people listening, mine was about architecting my life. Yours is about architecting or engineering a product. But my epiphany was, what if I were to do what my mother did and actually drop out of high school on purpose? There was a little loophole back then, and we're all have inventive minds. And then the loophole was that if you were to do well enough on a GED, you could go to any college in America, including Harvard. And I remember I was like, well, it seems to make so much sense. There was a little penny saver when I was a kid growing up, and I would always look at the ads, and I was making $3.75 at McDonald's, but the ads would say, delivering flyers for so-and-so, $8, college students only. I'm like, what is so impressive about being a college student? But I got to become a college student as fast as possible. And I came up with this crazy plan. I was going to drop out of high school at 16. And this is when my burn the boats moment happened. And everybody who's listening to me right now can relate to this. I remember telling my guidance counselor, Mr. Barkin, nice man at the time, say, and I would get picked up by the truant police. And I was like, no, Mr. Barkin, don't worry. I have a plan. I'm going to drop out of high school. I'm going to get a job making $8 an hour. It's right here in the penny saver. Isn't that brilliant? Everyone's like, you're out of your mind. You're going to throw away your whole life. You're going to be stigmatized and you're never going to overcome it. And I learned, when people don't have full context of your life because you have shame and you're not sharing it. I certainly wasn't sharing it. My mother was disintegrating and I was desperate. They give you terrible advice. And so it's one of my first points I really want to impart to everybody. Be careful who you consult with your epiphanies, because the magnitude of the opportunity has an inverse relationship with how much people are going to believe it at first and how much evidence there is for it. This idea that I would drop out of high school, get my GED, and go to college early made sense only to me, but it didn't matter. I was right, but they didn't have perspective on my desperate situation. And then I had a burn the boats epiphany. I need to sabotage my entire education so that I give myself no ability to turn back and everybody leaves me the hell alone. Everyone would kept intervening. You seem like such a smart young man. This is such a shame. And so my idea was, I'm going to burn the boats. I'm going to fail every single class in high school, except for typing, because I thought it would be useful. And I type 100 words a minute today. I'm going to fail everything else. I'm going to get left back. And I'm going to stay in the land of misfit toys until they write me off. And that's exactly what happened. I got left out over and over and over again. And I tell the story in the book, and I won't tell it right now on my last day of high school. But to make the long story short, I ended up going through with it. I got my GED. I did well enough. I enrolled in Queens College. And then I came back a year later to my high school prom as president of the debate team. And the look in my teacher's eyes and Mr. Barkin's eyes and everyone else had gone from a degree of pity and derision to begrudging admiration in one chess move. So the purpose of my book, and then I'll stop here, is basically to convey the power of when you funnel all your energy and concentrate all your conviction into a single tiny surface, and you never allow it to be shaken by conventional wisdom, by doubt, by reservation, what that can do. That single move to drop out of high school pulled forward my entire career by 2 full years and had that much more time to compound over the course of my life. Warren Buffett talks about compounding interest as the most important principle in money, but what we don't talk about is compounding as it relates to your career. The ability to act with urgency and intensity early enables you to spend an entire life reaping the benefits. So we'll get more into that, but that's my origin story. By the time I went from 16 scraping gum, by the time I was 26, I was the youngest press secretary in New York City history.
Matt, your childhood was intense. The story about your mother and the experiences that you had, I don't want to give it all away because definitely people have to read this book. I'm sure everybody has challenges in their life, and it's just a matter of how you overcome them. Either you kind of let them take you over or you do something about it. And you did it, Matt. You burned the boats at that moment. And I'm sure there's many other wins and successes that you had, but there was that moment where you needed to do what you needed to do to get to that point of saying, it's not like this. It doesn't have to be like this. We need to take it to the next level. And that's what you did. So congrats to you.
Thank you.
So Matt, on the call today, the audience, we're filled with inventors, entrepreneurs, startups. There's so many different names that you want to call them out there, but some people have an idea in their head. Some people are in the middle of working on their invention, on their business. Maybe they're in that development stage. And then there's some people that have a product or a service that they've launched. And let's just kind of break it down. So let's say now, to start off with, you have a great idea. And you know what? There was one more step. Maybe they're in business and now they're looking for funding to expand their business, because I know RSE Ventures is part of that type of success for many, many inventors and entrepreneurs out there. But let's just break it down. You've been on Shark Tank. You're getting pitched all the time. So tell me and tell us, what makes a good idea really a good idea? I mean, you have good ideas and people have great ideas and bad ideas, but what makes an idea something that really stands out to you, Matt?
Such a great question. Let me do it from the perspective, because there's different vantage points. What makes a good idea, a good idea from an investor? What makes a good idea for you? And I teach at Harvard Business School. For those who don't know that, I teach a course called Moving Beyond Direct to Consumer. And I had Kim Kardashian in the class. I've
Wow.
had Scarlett Johansson, who's one of my partners in a business, and I have everything from a startup, right? So you have the whole range. You have the CEO of Shopify, multi-billion-dollar businesses. But there tends to be in America this like worship of scale and growth and bigger and unicorns, although that's changing as we speak. But and I always tell my class this, like, don't bypass just how hard it is to take $1 and make it two, and how glorious it is to be able to create your own business with your own invention and feed yourself and feed your family. So there's a degree of mythology around the size of things. A lot of the times those companies have never even made any money. Has Uber ever made $1? So what I'm saying is, an idea that is good for you is not always good for an investor, but what matters most first is your needs. So I have to wrestle with this all the time. My mind is on fire and I come up with a great idea and I'm like, am I going to pursue this idea? And what always helps me is I always calculate opportunity cost at the beginning of a journey. And I think people bypass this. And what I mean is, I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this. You're in a crappy situation. Maybe you don't like your job. You're desperate to change it. You have an idea in the middle of the night, 3 a.m., and you are obsessed with this idea. So obsessed that you want to hold on to it with dear life, that you don't want to challenge that idea because it's your lifeline to get out of your situation. The problem with that logic sometimes is when you don't take the time to scrutinize that idea, you find 3 years down the road, wait a minute, this is not enough to sustain me. It's not enough to feed me. It's not interesting enough, for me to attract capital or people to it. So my litmus test is not to be afraid to ask the hard questions of, is this idea big enough for me to pursue it with all my heart for 5 years? Because it takes 3 years to just stabilize it and 5 years to really reap the harvest. So that's always my timeline. In order to answer that question, I have to ask myself, what else could I be doing in lieu of this idea, right? And a lot of people think that they'll never have a better idea. But I'm telling you, anybody listening to this right now, if you're inventive enough to come up with an idea that could have a market, it's feasible, then you'll find a better one. You have to always have conviction that your mind is capable of pursuing an even better one. This is where you have to listen to your real estate broker. When you got lost out on a house and they're like, there'll be another one on the market next week. And you're like, bullshit. And then sure enough, that ends up being true. So I always have conviction that that's the case. So let's break it down, even further. If from your vantage point, it's got to be enough of a good idea that it can be profitable and throw off enough money to meet your basic needs, however you define that. Certainly feeding yourself, your family, Now, if it's an investable concept, that's a totally different perspective, right? When I'm always saying to somebody who wants to pitch me, put yourself in my shoes, number one. Like, I don't want another job, which is what happens when I write you this check, because now I got to protect my precious money, right? I don't want to go on a rescue mission because you don't have it figured out and you're desperate, right? So what works for me, it has to be contextualized within my life or any investor's life, right? I want to spend the least amount of effort possible. I want to be able to provide some strategic advice to help affect the outcome. I'd love for that advice to actually increase the exponential of return, but I want you to de-risk it as much as possible. So I'll stop here for a second. But to me, what makes an investable idea is something that you've already demonstrated has a lot of traction, even if the idea isn't a product yet, but the need for the idea solves a very big problem in the marketplace. And you can demonstrate to me that there's enough people willing to pay enough money to solve that problem to make me generate a 5 to 10x return over 5 years.
Makes
That was
total
a
sense.
lot to unpack.
Yeah, that was a lot.
We can go deeper.
You know what, Matt? Plan A and Plan B, you talk about quite a bit in here. And from that, what you just mentioned, you talked about from in the heart. And I think, and you tell me from your experience, again, you're getting pitched all the time. You see different opportunities out there. But do you find that many people, when they're working on their ideas, their businesses, their product, whatever it is, that they're making emotional decisions more than a business decision? Because in your heart, like, you feel like this is the one, this is going to change your life. Something is going to happen if I just keep moving forward and driving this idea or this product or business. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, a great question. And I go into this in the burn the boats that the best decisions in life are when you're running toward an opportunity, right? When that is what is driving you. This is such a great opportunity. The worst decisions are when we're running from a bad situation. And I would argue that more often than not, that is the situation. And it clouds our judgment because we become desperate in order for that idea to be successful. So the most important thing is you got to look at it clearly and that's why I go back to my other point. Like you have to have confidence that if this idea isn't good enough, you'll be able to find another one. There's a great story in my book, great story, also an unfortunate story in Burn the Boats, and it was about a pitch. I don't remember the guy's name, but it was on Shark Tank. Everybody, when you buy the book, check out this. Go look under Mark Cuban in the index. But it was a gentleman who had been to, I believe, Japan and had discovered warming refrigerators for coffee in a can. And like this apparently is all the rage in Japan. I don't know. I'm actually going to Japan at the end of the month. I'll report back. But apparently this is all the rage. And he decided he is going to bring, warm coffee cans to the United States. And he had been working on it for 5 years and it generated no sales. And of course, you can imagine what happens next. Well, they're sure, what are you doing? And he was living in his mother's basement. He had spent like $1 million on it. And of course, Kevin O'Leary, in the way he always does, is like, take that idea back and kill it, But I think the reason why I included that in the book is to talk about what is it like to kill your own ideas. I have pursued some of the dumbest stuff that it's cringy, that I was convinced that, this feature was really a business when in fact it was a feature. And when I analyzed my behavior, you know why I did it? I was maybe going through a divorce and I was desperate to come up to something optimistic, or my last thing had failed and I was feeling vulnerable and I wanted to prove my worth. There were always my dumbest decisions to pursue a bad idea and refuse to kill it always come from a place of vulnerability. So you got to audit your motives and make sure that you're not running from something, that you're running to something.
In your book, Burn the Boats, there are a couple parts that I pointed out for this particular part where you have to make that decision. Are you thinking with your emotions? You're thinking with your business cap on? Are you going to move forward with this idea? You may be hitting a brick wall many, many times. Do you keep hitting the brick wall? Do you stop? Do you quit? There's all these things that go through your mind. So, Matt, in your book, in the beginning, it says, it's okay to be unsure if it's the right move or the right time, or to imagine that your good idea should be obvious to everyone around you. But if you act on those doubts, I promise you're only going to sabotage yourself, right?
Yeah. So let's break this down because I love this debate. Some people who are, first of all, if you buy my book, if you're not an optimistic person who believes that anything can happen in this great country, don't buy the book. You're going to see it as like nonsense. If you're somebody who believes anything really can happen and that the world is full of infinite possibility, you will see my book as a blueprint or a roadmap, in order to do it. So the word "burn the boats," the concept in the book, and to do a quick history lesson, if you don't mind, this idea goes back to the beginning of recorded history, which is interesting because it's always attributed to Cortez in 1519, who literally, attacked the Aztecs, very bad man, a conquistador, burned 10 of his 11 boats, and he prevailed and destroyed the Aztec Empire. People always attribute it to him. What I find fascinating when I was researching this idea throughout my career, every culture on earth and every language has a fabled general who, in order to prevail, literally burns their boats and destroys their food provisions. And so Alexander the Great, there's a Chinese general in 207 BC. There's Sun Tzu in The Art of War that goes back to 400. And what I found actually is that Spain had been conquered in around 711 by a general named Tariq, and he burned his boats. So I'm sure little Cortez learned about it in school, like, I'll do that next time I invade Mexico. So my point to you is, why is it that military strategists understand intuitively that to get the most out of human beings, we need to limit and lessen our options? Yet we as adults are cultured and cultivated to believe that that's dangerous, that we all need a backup plan. And what I wanted to explore was the science behind, does this hold true now? And what I found is in 2014, there was a study at Wharton that tried to assess what is the consequence of having a backup plan, just thinking about it. And it's a fascinating study. What they found is just thinking about the possibility of achieving your goal another way, statistically, dramatically lessened the likelihood you'd ever achieve plan A. And it did something else. It eliminated your motivation. The people in the study group who were given the option to think about another way simply did not care. So what Burn the Boat speaks to is when you have your goal, and out there, everyone, presumably your goal is to bring your idea to life or bring your business to life. When you have a goal, right, it requires 110% of your energy because it's such a big, audacious goal. Me writing this book, teaching at Harvard, escaping poverty, becoming press secretary, ending up on Shark Tank. These are big, hard things, right? When you have one of those big goals, you can't allow any energy leakage. And when you do, just that small amount of energy leakage thinking about plan B is enough to ruin your plan A. So let's talk about what is plan A? What does it mean to burn the boats? What it is and what it isn't. What it is fully committing to bringing your invention or your business to life. What it isn't is committing to a specific tactic. And this is where people go wrong. They're like, oh, well, I tried that, Matt. It's irresponsible. You're telling people to keep doing the same thing over and over again. I said, it doesn't say burn the boats with you on it. It says burn the boats, burn the thing that's holding you back. But I 1000% believe that along the way, you must constantly pivot and iterate. When I'm doing a deal and looking to invest in a founder, an inventor, I'm assessing their capacity to make those course corrections along the way. Do they have the self-awareness? Do they have the confidence and humility to say, hey, what I'm doing is not working? And I would say, I don't care what product you have out there or what inventive idea, if what you're trying to bring to market and the market is rejecting it or you're not getting up, there's a pivot somewhere in your dream that will enable you to break through. That might mean adjusting the product. That might mean inventing something else that solves the same problem, right? But there's a pivot to be had. So plan A, the burning of the boats, is the commitment to bring the thing to life. It's not a commitment to a specific tactic. So cynical people who read the book will be like, well, I don't know, Matt. It's just a recipe for doing the same thing over and over. I said, I didn't say I'm stupid. Like, I'm constantly pivoting and course correcting, but I never stop. I will manifest this book into a bestseller on planet Earth, and I will die trying. And that's what I'm trying to channel in this book.
So plan A, keep driving, keep moving forward. But I think, Matt, also, many people need to listen and take people's advice that have been there, done that. You talk quite a bit in your book about building a team and having people by your side to help you to get to where you need to, because there's only so much time in the day. But realistically, you got to figure out what it is that you need to do, what you need to, or hear what people are saying to you to be able to make better decisions.
Yeah, I mean, well, let's talk a little bit about it. Everyone here, going back to something I said earlier, I hope you caught on to what I was saying. I want to repeat it again, that opportunity arrives before the tipping point of evidence. It's sort of obvious when you think about it, but in the book, I analogize it to lightning and thunder, right? Opportunity is that flash of lightning that you see and it disappears in an instant. But around 5 seconds later, because thunder and sound travels a lot slower than the speed of light, you hear the unmistakable confirmation that you saw the lightning. Everybody else sees it too, right? And that's evidence, that's data. We need to train our minds to act on opportunity before the tipping point of evidence. The challenge is it's very lonely. So in those early days when you're trying to get momentum for an idea, I don't believe what conventional wisdom tells you. You got to pressure test it. You got to get cynics to tear it apart. I think new ideas are very fragile and it's very lonely and can be very painful. And there are people around you, and some people listening to me right now are going to be shaking their heads. There are people who resent the fact that you're trying to break out that little box that you've been in because they know you that way. Or more often, you are confronting them, their desire to play it safe. And they need confirmation that it's dangerous out there. So they undermine you in kind of undercutting ways. And so in the book, I try to distill this advice with words to say, so who should you consult? I believe you identify the agendaless supporters who don't have an agenda. They're in your corner because they love you. However, they can't be delusional. And so you want to consult the agendaless supporters who are pragmatic optimists, right? They have good wisdom. They have good judgment. They're optimistic because optimistic people don't invent things, right? Nobody on this, there probably isn't a pessimist on this call right now, right? I've never seen a wildly successful pessimist in my entire career. So optimistic people are the ones who invent stuff, but you want them to be pragmatic. So if you want a little more, again, I go deeper into the book, but that's who the people you want to consult with when you're getting started. Because when I look back, what my biggest regrets are in my career, and I don't have a lot, but I look back to the moments when I was vulnerable and I consulted the wrong people and I allowed them to create an echo chamber in my brain, like that little ping pong backing back, like, Matt, you're ridiculous. You're so audacious. No one's going to care about your idea. And I killed it. I self-censored before the world even got a shot in.
Matt, there are people out there that come up with an idea and they have their day job. They're out there kind of working a side hustle. Let me see if I can make this idea something and convert it into my full-time job. I have this dream of really being able to change my life. And then there's other people that want to actually start a business and be an entrepreneur. What do you feel are the important traits of being an entrepreneur? And we could talk about the inventor and licensing to earn royalties, and you can be limited on funds, or you just might want to have somebody who's an expert take your idea to the next level. But what are the traits? Because you've been pitched again many times and you've worked with many entrepreneurs out there. What are the key elements of entrepreneurship that really stands out to you?
I mean, so let's assume a reasonable degree of intelligence is obviously important, table stakes, but frankly, tenacity is very, very important. We all know this. You have to have the ability to just keep trying, but tenacity without self-awareness is a recipe for disaster, right? It just means you're just going to keep doing the same thing over and over again. So why self-awareness is important because it's a predictor of whether somebody is going to take feedback and input and they're going to make course correction. So I look for somebody who's got both of those skills side by side. They're tenacious, they're confident, they have the ability to persist constantly, but at the same time they have self-awareness. I'll tell you the scenario I see a lot that's a bad scenario. Somebody will excitedly come for me for an idea. Hey, I got this idea. I have a patent pending or whatever. I'm about to get a patent, or my cousin Vinny is trying to get a patent, but it's a really great idea. You should go, make a product or you should give me money or you should go take it. And like that to me is somebody who's just looking for a payoff, looking for a rescue. And they're not willing to, put the time and energy. And that happens more often than not. Somebody's just looking for me to do the work. I want you to do the work and I want to benefit and profit from it.
You talk in your book about money situation. Maybe money's tight. You have to come up with a plan to raise money. And that's why a lot of people raise money out there or go to different venture type of opportunities. And also the timeline. You want to be able to figure out what your expectations are, almost to have a plan for yourself. You talk about that quite a bit in the book. And I also love the self-talk. That actually, I used that the other day. I tried it and it worked. Can you just touch on that a bit?
Well, let's break those different topics down. So timeline, a lot of times I'm sure people here can relate to it. Like I had a really great idea or a great insight about what was going to happen in the world. I think my pattern recognition skills are pretty good. Anyone out there who's been through traumatic experiences knows what I'm talking about. When you go through trauma, you tend to be a little bit more hypervigilant, hyper aroused. You're scanning the environment constantly for threat. The benefit of that is you have great pattern recognition. So I do tend to think I spot trends early, and then I get really excited and I make some kind of commitment to invest in that trend or back that trend or start a company. But what I failed to do is to structure the bet to give myself enough time to be right. It's hard enough to be right, but you got to give yourself time to be right. So anyone out there who's got an idea that's ahead of the world, ahead of the curve, you believe that the problem will metastasize over time and you'll be ready to meet the problem with a product, you got to make sure that you're giving yourself enough time so that you don't have to wave the white flag before you ever had your moment. I see this happened a lot with me, right? I've been predicted things early, but I didn't have enough time. My bet wasn't structured correctly, and I couldn't handle it. So that's what I talk about timing. In terms of going all in, you talked before about, side hustle versus your main event. I'm not one of those people that's like, I want to see you, be like all in and, you can't even eat. Like, I don't think people make the best decisions when they're completely desperate. I don't mind somebody doing something as a side hustle until there's a tipping point, as long as the tipping point is rationally related to managing their risk. Hey, I got to pay the rent. I can't practically quit my job. I don't want to be homeless. You know what I mean? But it's when what I see more often than not is people are waiting for no good reason. And when I pressure test it, like, but why? Why do you need to make sure you have all of the whole foods before you can go ahead and, launch your CPG business? It's usually BS. And it's because we tend to erect barriers to our own success because we're afraid. We choose incrementalism, an incrementalist approach, instead of choosing a step change and sort of going all in. So my point is, if you're somebody out there who's got practical reasons for being only half in, I accept that, as long as you've identified for me what's the moment, the tipping point that you're, going to go on. As terms of self-talk, I talk openly in my book about dealing with anxiety, I think our relationship with anxiety, we're sort of conditioned to believe that anxiety is something to be extinguished. And I don't think that's true, actually. First of all, anybody who's had anxiety knows, yeah, great. Thanks for the advice. Like, obviously we'd all love to extinguish anxiety. I think anxiety is something to be harnessed. And so I did a lot of research in my book to say, what is the optimal level of anxiety? And there's a lot of studies that show actually anxiety is a powerful force for commanding your best effort, obviously, that it propels you. And yet too much anxiety can be paralyzed. And so anxiety to me is something that you want to constantly toggle and make sure that you have just enough to motivate you and not too much to paralyze you. And I give practical advice in the books about how to do that. So imposter syndrome is a corollary of anxiety, its cousin. And when I went on Shark Tank, and again, I debated whether to put this in a book. It's embarrassing, and I prefer to just have you all believe I was a natural. But that's not so useful. So I tell you the truth. When I went on Shark Tank, imagine me, this kid. I wish I could show you behind me. I got a box of government cheese on my desk that I keep there to remind me from where I came, right? So I went on the set of Shark Tank thinking, here's Mark Cuban and all these guys, they're huge, and they're going to see right through me as the fraud that I am. And they're going to see, where I came from in Queens. And I remember the only one I felt I could confide in is Damon John. Damon actually grew up a couple of miles away from me, very different background. Obviously, he's black, I'm white, but like we had somewhat of a shared experience of poverty. And working in McDonald's, he worked in Red Lobster. And I said, hey, can I talk to you? I know this is embarrassing, but I'm freaked out. And I'm dealing with a heavy case of imposter syndrome. Do you have any advice for me? First, and after he's like, F them, or whatever, like, belligerent, like, we're from Queen. He goes, Matt, let me tell you the only thing you need to know. You belong here because you are here. And to me, it was like Plato spoke to me, or, Socrates. Like, I want everyone to hear that sentence, right? You belong here because you are here. You belong to be an inventor because you came up with an invention. No one's ever going to give you permission to be in the arena, to file that patent. You know what I mean? To be a target. Like, if you're there, you belong there. And it was the greatest piece of advice. And so when I went on set armed with that advice, I froze. Even with that advice, I remember at one point, somebody's pitching. I'm not saying anything. I see Mark Cuban leans over. He's got that look of like pity and like, who the hell invited this kid in here? And I remember a voice in my head, like, this is totally true. I sort of like closed my eyes for a nanosecond, and I imagine myself standing on the edge of a cliff, and I know there's water down below, but I can't see it. But I know there's water there. I know it. The water to me was like, I know I've done deals, big deals. I've invented companies or created companies, right? I architected my way out of dirt. I ran 9/11 with the mayor of New York, and I've done all these hard things, and I'm going to let the set of Shark Tank defeat me. And I was like, no. And the little voice in my head said, Matt, you belong here because you are here. And I get to work. And I kicked their ass. I said, the last thing I hear, I went into the zone, you know what I mean? And then at the end of the pitch, the guy goes, you got a deal. And I hear Kevin Leary go, well, I guess I'm out. He never went back to Kevin to find the answers. So that's a long way of saying to everybody out there who's got imposter syndrome and anxiety, third-party affirmations, third-party talk creates a super ego. Studies show, don't say, I belong here. You have to say Matt or use your name, Brian, because it's that third party that creates a super ego authority, especially for those that don't have parents or unconditional love or spouse or friend. It creates that super authority that has unconditional command and respect, but also has your best interest to tell you, hey, shut up, get in the arena.
You know what I love about your book also, Matt? You put all this information out, and there's a lot of your personal situations and stories and entrepreneurs that are successful and some failures that maybe moved on, but you back it up with data, and you put statistics and real proof that what you're saying is true.
I love data. Well, Brian, I appreciate you saying that. Like, I think a lot of these business books, are painfully redundant. They feel a little bit like a hustle. This is not a hustle for me. I bled on these pages, and I worked hard to make it a readable story, because that's how we learn. We learn through stories, and we learn through modeling. And so my purpose of my book, I love that you picked that up. I'll appeal to your brain if you don't want to hear it. I'll prove to you through science. I'm going to prove to your heart by telling you about my gut-wrenching, journey. And I'll appeal to you through heroics, through role models, by telling you great stories. I'll credentialize myself by stripping myself bare in front of you in ways that are very uncomfortable. I open the book with, my book had to be rewritten at the last minute. This is a great story, Brian. I don't know if you know this. My book was meant to start with triumph. to tell you to be a to show you like perseverance, right? So the first part of my book was how I raised $206 million during the pandemic from this chair in my boxer shorts, and I IPO'd, raised 200 million bucks to take a company public. Yay me! I ring the bell at the stock exchange. I was sort of begrudging. I didn't really want to. Didn't feel great. I was all cranky about it. Like, who cares? Let's just get on with it. The next day I get COVID and I get double pneumonia, come within an inch of my life, right? So like the story is supposed to be a triumphant story, and then the market collapses, and I chose to close it down and return all the money to investors. I'm like, okay, I guess that story becomes one of of iteration and whatever, right? Okay, great. The book is almost final. I have a new TV show that's about to start. It's a version of Shark Tank called Business Hunters. I work on it for almost 11 weeks shooting in Florida. It's a great show teaching Americans about how to buy a business. It's like my pride and joy. I kill myself for this show. I'm so excited, ready to go. And then a new president takes over CNBC and they cancel the show with everything. But the book has already gone to printer. So I'm like, well, the editor, they're like, you need to rewrite the book. And I thought, I think God or the universe is trying to tell me that the book is supposed to start with my failure. And I realized, you know why the book is supposed to start that way? We don't tell the truth about failure. We use empty platitudes and bullshit Instagram posts about, failure is great. Failure sucks. So let me show you what it's like. And I love that about the book, because now what I've gotten the feedback from people who've read it saying, for once somebody at the high level showed that life is a series of progressions and regressions, of victories and setbacks, and yet through it all. And so I decided, hey, let me put the divorce in there. I have cancer. I have one testicle. Let's talk about that. Let's you know what I mean? Like, it's all in the book. Again, it's not about being an autobiography. I could care less. It's about modeling what it looks like to be a real human being who's had a degree of success that some people might admire, to show that it isn't a tidy, it isn't perfect, and I have a ton of regrets. But the one thing I always did was burn the boats. Last point, I will extract more value from those two failures that are in the first few pages of my book than whatever would have happened if I succeeded on that. I guarantee you I will create a better show than the one that was going to air. And I guarantee you, by virtue of me understanding public markets, I will be on CNBC over and over again. You know what I mean? And so when you collectively, you're listening out there, it's on you to figure out how to extract value from tragedy and crisis. But I'm always positive. When something bad happens, something better can happen as a result.
I promise you, everybody, the audience, buy the book. And I'm not just promoting this book hey, Matt, you're on, buy the book. There's great lessons learned here. You're going to have something that you're going to pick up in here that's going to help you. We're all inventors, entrepreneurs, startups. It's a very good book. And I'm reading it. I'm reading it again. So thank you for that.
There will be a quiz.
Matt,
thank you, Brian.
The audience are at all different stages. And a lot of times, just you being a shark, you being an investor, we have these ideas. We might need money. Maybe we want to license it to earn royalties. Maybe we want to start our own business. So Matt, if you could just give us a quick lesson, because I really appreciate you being here. And, this is a big accomplishment for me to have you on, for the audience. And that's why I do this. I think I've asked you 5-6 times. Sometimes I catch your attention. Sometimes I didn't. I caught you this time with your book and really the message that can resonate to the inventor. So thank you. But we're at a point where we're looking for money. We want to start our own business. So we hear seed funding, angel, venture capital. I know that in the thread here, there's a lot of people looking to pitch you. So when is the right, maybe you could just touch on quickly like what those are, and then when the right time is to pitch somebody like yourself.
Yeah, and I think there are different stages, right? So let's just talk about all you have to do. People don't never do this. Like if you're an inventor out there and you have an idea, just put yourself in the shoes of an investor and different kinds of investors, right? If the investor if it's a seed round, it's somebody who knows you, because that's where you want to start, the people who believe in you, right? So ask yourself, if one of your friends came to you and they wanted money from you that you fought for, it's hard-earned money that's not going into your kid's 529 plan or you're betting on football, whatever it is you do with your money, what would you need to know? And so the simple rule of thumb is like, show me that this idea is inevitable, that like this problem that exists is widespread. Many people have it. The solution that you have for that problem is inevitably going to be the winning solution, that enough people are willing to pay for that solution, Ideally, some people have already started paying for that solution. And then the intangibles. The universe, God put you on this earth to be the one person who could bring this to life, right? And I think that last one is where people go wrong a lot, because they're looking for the quick score. They're running a hustle. And like we are very intuitive. We can figure out like, you're just trying to like dump this and get, paid for it. So demonstrate to me that the universe put you here to invent this product, this idea, bring this business to life. Well, how do you do that? That sounds great, Matt, but what do you mean? A lot of the best ideas come from what I call proprietary insights. When they come from your job, your context, you have firsthand observation of a specific type of problem. The gentleman before with the road sign, I don't know his background, but maybe he worked at the U.S. Department of Transportation or Highway, and he saw it and he was like, you know what, cars keep crashing. This road sign is a solution, right? Show me that there's an inevitability, not only about the specific solution, right, and that the problem is big enough to matter, but also that you are the right person at the right time to bring it to life, and you also have the wherewithal to deal, with the setbacks. When is the right time to go get money? There's different phases, right? If you don't even have a product and you just have an idea and you're shopping for a license, sophisticated investors, believe their first bias is to think, somebody's going to find a workaround around your patent. At least that's always my bias, right? Somebody comes to me shopping a patent, I'm like, whatever. I assume somebody else can, right? So, and by the way, I don't want to take the work to go ahead and figure out how to, monetize it. I'm much more interested if, one, you actually have a working prototype. If, two, you've done a Kickstarter campaign and you show me that there are like 2,000 people who love this so much they pay. Now it's getting kind of interesting. So I'll give you my own personal bias. I want to see evidence that the problem is big enough. I want to see evidence that your solution is being embraced by some cohort. You can, again, do that through Kickstarter. That's quasi institutional money. If I'm Aunt Sally, I'm mostly going to endorse you as a person, right? Like, and I think ironically, a lot of people skip Aunt Sally because they don't want to deal with the friction of it. And yet me as an institutional investor, I'm like, hey, how much did Aunt Sally put in the first round? And I'm like, when some people are like, well, why do you ask? I said, because I know that if you took Aunt Sally's money, damn, you were going to make sure you don't lose it because you can't go to Thanksgiving.
Right.
And so I would say to anybody, and here's the problem they make. They get greedy at the beginning. They don't want Aunt Sally to own too much of the business. You should reward your agendaless supporters who back you early and be willing to give away 15% of the company in order to get, those early support. So long story short, pre-product, don't try to raise institutional money. Raise it for family so you can get a prototype. If you got a prototype, demonstrate traction enough that somebody can write you that angel check, that seed. I hate these words.
Sense.
I use angel for pre-product, seed for pre-A, which takes the prototype and scales it, and A is for sales.
And it's all about timing. It's got to be the right time also. And that's what you talk about in your book. Very interesting, Matt. I'm just trying to figure out now, there's so many different ventures that you're involved with. So you've invested, and we talked about investing and when that right time is to invest. So you've invested in many companies and products. What are some of them? I know the international soccer tournament, the drones, Momofuku. I want to make sure I'm saying that correctly, but some great stuff. What are some other household brand names that people know out there?
Oh God. I mean, I have different buckets for those who are trying to make sense of my life, right? Like RSE Ventures is more of a private equity consumer shop. So version 1.0, I would build businesses that I talk about in the book. I'm pretty good at identifying talent. And so I would incubate. I incubated a communications firm that ended up being the darling of the direct-to-consumer community. We would take equity plus retainers. So we have 15 unicorns in that. We sold it for a healthy amount recently to Berlin Rosen. But as part of that, I have 100 direct-to-consumer businesses. So, brands you would know on this call, Magic Spoon cereal. Those who like
Milk
protein. Bar. Milk Bar, a significant largest shareholder of Milk Bar. Banana Pudding, Magnolia Bakery. I own that company outright. Acquired it during the pandemic. So and then little small pieces of different Bonza pasta. Those who are foodies probably heard of Resi, the reservation service. I incubated that with my partners Gary Vaynerchuk and Ben Lair. So I basically play all across the spectrum. I haven't done as much pure product as an invention. I've done more CPG. It doesn't mean I wouldn't do it, the conditions would have to be right. Like I said, early traction, Kickstarter is a great idea, and again, the reason why I haven't done it is just because you have a product doesn't necessarily mean you have a company, right? And then if you don't have a company, how am I going to get a venture type return by putting money to work, right? So, however, if somebody has a product and they need capital, and they're like, look, I'll cut you into the residuals, like a Mr. Wonderful type deal, right? Return of capital plus royalty and perpetuity. I'd be interested in it. The challenging for an investor who invests at scale and writes checks of $10-20 million, which I do, to then write a check for 200. Like, I know I'm signing up for a job, right? There's no forget. People always say there's no free lunch. There's also no free check. Like, I got to chase that check. You expect phone calls from me. So, one of my biggest laments, actually, to be honest, it's not really insecurity. It's more aspiration. I never invented anything. I want to show you, actually. This is for those who can see it. This is my great grandfather, Charles Higgins. This is a check. This is a blank check. I don't know what blank check and writing fabric for the same. And then here, more interestingly, is his ink bottle that he created. So that's anybody awesome out there who's an architect or an artist has heard of the brand Higgins ink. My great grandfather invented it. Permanent Indian ink back in 1890. Had no formal education. Immigrant from Ireland. Became a huge company. He's actually buried at the highest point in New York in Greenwood Cemetery. So he was when he died, governor, president of the United States, all that good stuff. And then, of course, we squandered everything. So by the time I was gone, but the brand still exists. And I never actually encountered the brand until I had testicular cancer. And they were about to they had to make sure forever there would be tattoos all over my body to track the radiation field in case it came back. And I was like, great. And so they're about to stick me with it. And I'm like, what do you use? Let me see. It was a needle. And he goes, oh, this stuff. This will never come out. It was Higgins ink.
Wow.
Like, wow. Like 120 years later. And so I say that to everybody on this call. There's something glorious about having an idea and a patent, bringing a product to life that can last 100 years. You know what I mean? And like, I have never actually invented anything. And I have such admiration and respect for everybody on the call who has an idea. I wish I had a good idea. I've had good ideas for companies and I've done things, but I've never invented anything. So I have the utmost respect for that. Unfortunately, my grandfather sold that damn company, but the patents still hang all over my house.
That's awesome. I can't believe what a story. Like Higgins ink.
Right, isn't that amazing? Right in front of you. Yeah, I have the bottle. I have the bottle on my desk right next to the government cheese box. A tale of two cities, right? Of two lives.
So, Matt, you've been in politics and entrepreneurship and on Shark Tank and at McDonald's. What's next for you?
I have never experienced, this is, from the bottom of my heart, I've never experienced more personal and professional joy than I have in writing this book, because throughout my life, I feel like I've made trajectory changing differences in people's lives through advice. The stories in the book, I whited me out, so you don't really see my role in those different scenarios, but I was in there, but my book was an attempt, if I could write something that could move people to act, like maybe people on this call, to really believe and go all in from every demographic. Like, if I could go back in time and for you all to see me not as the middle-aged guy on Shark Tank who you presume is wealthy or a little bit other than, but know me as the 16-year-old government cheese taking care of his mom. If I could connect with you with authority so that you believe what I said and I can make you go all in, that is a life worth living. And I'm getting direct messages from people all over the world who are using the boat as the metaphor as it was intended, not as no escape, but as torching the thing that was holding back. One woman said that she had to have spinal surgery, but she was afraid. And she read my book and realized, I'm never going to achieve my full potential unless I finally have the surgery. And she did. I had a 19-year-old kid who was dealing with depression and from his acne and couldn't tell the truth to his parents until he read the book, and he told them, and now he's getting therapy and he's finally pursuing things. And so, like, for me, the book, like, is all I need to achieve in my life. I really mean that. I'm almost like, I can't believe I can't come up with another goal. I just want to tell the story of the book, and I want people to read it. And I don't have any other goals. So, like, I have other companies, and I have other things. I just want everybody out there, hopefully, if it makes a difference in your life and made you feel like you could pull it off too, that's a life worth living.
That's awesome, Matt. All right, so let's take this one. What do you recommend for folks fundraising in the entertainment industry, more specifically ventures that leverage virtual production?
Oh, I don't know totally how to answer that. So, Clarito, why don't you do a follow up so you can be a little more specific? I mean, just to give you context, I just created a production company with Gary Vaynerchuk to create reality TV, largely on business, but partly driven about the story I just told you in the beginning of the book. I'm like, I always think, what would be better than, right? So being on Shark Tank, I was like, what would be better than being on Shark Tank? Well, the host of my own Shark Tank. And so then I created it. And then, of course, it gets canceled. I'm like, what would be better than being the host of your own Shark Tank that then got canceled? Well, the host of your own Shark Tank that could never get canceled. So I created my own production studio so that I am the undisputed owner of that content. So I don't know what to tell you. If you come back with a follow-up to be a little more specific, I can give you a more specific answer. You know what I want to say? One other thing, Jeff and Brian, everybody out there, Ruth, everybody with their nice comments too. I talk in the book about partnership because I'm sure a lot of people on this call will be dealing with whether to take on a co-founder or someone else to come. And I want to share with you what happens at the end of every one of my Harvard classes, right? This is Lollapalooza of direct-to-consumer and e-com, right? Like I met Kim Kardashian for 2 hours and I took a lot of shit for it online too, which I was like, you know what? She's a badass female entrepreneur who built a $4 billion business. So I don't care what you say. I'm an investor, by the way, full disclosure, but amazing business. But I ask every founder when there's a tandem, the students want to know how'd you choose your partner? And they always give the same answer. They say, you're taught to believe that you want to choose a partner based upon the skills that you're missing, right? And I bet you everyone on here is like, right, if I'm great with the numbers, I need a salesperson, right? Every single successful business always gives the opposite answer. They say you want to choose a partner that aligns with your values, even if they overlap with your skills. Because what determines success or failure of a business is when you have a massive setback. And when the two of you don't have value alignment, that's when the business crumbles. Isn't that interesting? That it's more important to build a business to survive the bad times than it is to take advantage of the good times. Because what everyone says is, people who have value alignment know how to divide responsibilities. One person just becomes a little bit smarter on supply chain because they're anal retentive, and the other person is gregarious and charismatic. So they become the marketer, so that's number one. And number two, nobody can win a two-front war. When you look throughout history, you always find the story if you try to engage a two-front war. If you have a partner who's in your foxhole, but doesn't have your back, you will fail. So make sure when you launch this business and whatever, choose wisely. You don't want a partner who will complete you. You want someone who will amplify you. And, God bless, thankfully, I chose a wife. My wife, Sarah, is the greatest force multiplier on earth. She's the reason I wrote this book. She's the reason I'm on Shark Tank. She's the reason I have any wealth that I have is because of my wife. And I don't say that in a cliche way. It's a fact. I have the most badass wife by my side. So I would say to anybody, if you don't have that kind of partner, it doesn't mean walk away. Insist that you develop that kind of dynamic because you will not be successful professionally or as successfully as you could have been.
How can we be in touch with you, stay in touch with you? I know that I connect with you through.
Yeah, I like LinkedIn. Yeah. I could tell you to send something to the box at RSE. Here's my word. If I see something and it's not something we're going to do, I'm going to tell you very directly. I don't want you to waste your time. I don't want to be passive, afraid of confronting you. If it's not something we're going to do, I'm going to say, hey, this is not something we would do. If you have some kind of advice you need, I always give this thing. Don't ask somebody to be your mentor. Like anybody with ambition has their own dreams they're trying to achieve. Make it easy. Ask a single question. Hey, I'm looking for this. Any advice? And I'm always willing to fire off a question, but I'm very intentional with my time because of opportunity cost. So if it's not something that even we would even look, I'm going to tell you very directly. Don't be upset by that. Be grateful because I just saved you time. And I think when people are always afraid to do that, they think they're doing somebody a favor by avoiding the conflict. Like I try to discipline myself to give people fast no's.
Thank you so much for doing this, really, to communicate to the inventors out there that anything is possible. You got to just stick with plan A. It's okay. There's going to be setbacks. You got to just keep moving forward, find that way, but don't give yourself options. Just keep yourself moving forward. And you put so many different examples in there, your personal examples, other people's experiences, fact, data to back it up. And that's what we really appreciate. So buy this book, Burn the Boats. I'm not just sitting here giving a promo. I read it. I'm a believer of it. And Matt has just spoken about it for the last hour and change. So you know that it's good stuff. So thank you again. And I also wanted to thank Daniel, your sidekick, to be able to help and make this happen and keep us together and make this possible tonight. So thank you, Dan, and the rest of your team at I know that you have a newsletter because I'm getting the newsletter. I know you have your website, your newsletter, your book. How can we keep in touch with you, Matt? I know LinkedIn is really good. You're putting a lot of great posts out.
Yeah, I have a newsletter. I think the link is on my Twitter profile. I'll make sure we're off here. Yeah, the newsletter, again, as I was getting all these messages from all over the world, let me tell you why I created the newsletter real quick. I feel an obligation now that I've sparked the fire to fan the flames. You know, when you read a book and you're left with that, you're like, oh, I feel so good. And then the feeling fades and you're a little melancholy. Like, I wish I could have sat with the feeling. So the purpose of the newsletter is to extend the feeling as it begins to maybe, the flames flitter or whatever, flicker. I want to flames flicker. I want to make sure that I fan those flames. The newsletter will constantly resupply the dopamine hit so that, after you read the book, you can become part of a community of boat burners. And so I just want to have the last word with everyone out here. I know how hard it is to advance an idea when, one, there's no evidence to support it, when maybe you have no history of being the kind of person to bring ideas to life. Maybe you have no money. Maybe you have no support system, but you're onto something. All I can say is it's very lonely to be on the leading edge, but that's our cross to bear, right? And that one day, when you start to get that little bit of traction, there'll be the one follower, then maybe there'll be 5, then all of a sudden it's 20, and then it begins to compound. And it's amazing when you were early and no one else saw what you see, and all of a sudden you turn around like I did with drone racing, and now I have millions of people watching this thing that I wrote a first check off of a PowerPoint deck from a kid in my office in 2015. So I say that only to be like, this is what it looks like. It's painful, it's arduous, it's lonely, it's embarrassing, it's audacious, but this is what it looks like. And so this is unfortunately your cross to bear for bringing it forward. So stay with it, iterate, always be always willing to pivot and course correct, listen to what the market's trying to tell you. But there are many ways to achieve the same outcome. If you have an invention that's solving a problem and it's not right, take a step back, find another way to solve a problem, right? If it turns out the problem was smaller than you thought, find an adjacent problem that's bigger, but just stay with it. But most importantly, this is your cross to bear. So find fellow travelers like Brian in this club, people like me, read the book, don't listen to the haters, and surround yourself with pragmatic optimists who could always boost you up. But again, this is what it looks like. And don't take it as evidence that you're failing. Take it as evidence that you're trying. And most people wouldn't bother. So I'd love to come back. We'll do this again after you read the book. Come back in a few months and hear what the progress is, hear how your progress has been.
Thank you very much, Matt. So again, all of you, buy the book, Burn the Boats. You can find it on Amazon, easy enough. 2 clicks and you got it in your mailbox in 2 days. And again, thank you, Matt. We appreciate you, your book, all the ventures that you're involved with, and the success stories and where you came from. And that's my lesson from you is don't forget where you came from, because I've been there, done that also. And you get levels of success and you feel them and you taste them and you want more and you never look back. So thank you so much for that, Matt.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you. You too. All right. That was some treat. Matt, thank you again for joining us. We are lucky. National Inventor Club. And until next time, thank you, everybody. Appreciate you. Go on to nationalinventorclub.com and join as a free or premium member, no matter what it is, as long as you get the information that we put out there. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon.